In the process of gathering information on warehouses shutting their doors, we came across a recent logistics company closing. Carol Fulmer Logistics, a family-owned trucking company based in Groveland, Florida, is shutting down after 71 years in operations, citing a prolonged freight recession and a barrage of costly personal injury lawsuits. Fleet size, approximately 400 trucks and 1,700 trailers, with around 600 employees being laid off. The loss of Carol Fulmer underscores the great severity of the freight recession and adds to the concerns over logistics capacity and reliability nationwide. Carol Fulmer's collapse is one of several high-profile failures this year. Coupled with persistent low freight volumes, it signals the recession may last longer than hoped for. Larger carriers with strong balance sheets are weathering the storm, but smaller and mid-sized fleets like Carol Fulmer are more vulnerable to both weak demand and rising litigation cost. If volumes don't recover soon, more bankruptcies will shrink available capacity, eventually flipping the market from oversupplied to undersupplied, with potential heavy rate spikes and service disruptions. Growing financial losses, persistent weak freight demand that began in March of 2022, termed by insiders as the Great Freight Recession, is still trending across the U.S. trucking sector in mid-2025. The closure adds to a growing list of fleet bankruptcies and exits during the Great Freight Recession. As more carriers exit, the imbalance of too many trucks chasing too little freight will gradually correct, tightening capacity. And if enough small and mid-sized carriers continue to shut down, the industry could hit an inflection point by late 2025 or early 26, pushing rates up potentially sharply, especially for spot freight. The closure of Carol Fulmer Logistics after 71 years is more than just the end of a respected family-run business. It's a warning flare for the entire freight industry. As the recession grinds on, companies with long histories and deep regional roots are finding it harder to survive amid collapsing spot rates, rising operation cost, and a legal landscape that increasingly punishes carriers. While the immediate impact of their closure may be localized, the long-term effects could reshape the trucking industry. Those who adapt quickly, streamline operations, and weather the storm will emerge stronger. But for other trucking companies, the road ahead may be a lot shorter than expected. Drivers, as we continue to dive deep into what has been termed as the Great Freight Recession. And while you, your coworkers, family, and friends have been distracted by whatever nonsense is trending on social media, you probably missed something fundamental that has been quietly falling apart. I'm talking about the downward spiraling freight economic and its negative effects that are showing up everywhere. Think of it as the silent circulatory system of our economy suddenly developing a nasty clot. And like any clot, if you ignore it, things can get very, very bad. The most visible and frankly most heartbreaking symptom of this is the shuttering of American factories. These aren't just buildings, they are the beating hearts of entire communities, providing jobs, identity, and a sense of stability. Recently, 5 major plants have announced they are closing their doors for good. Now, 5 might not sound like a lot in a country this vast, but this is like seeing 5 canaries drop dead in a coal mine. It's not about the individual birds, it's about the toxic air everyone is breathing. These closures are a flashing red light on the dashboard of the U.S. economy, signaling deep systemic issues that we ignore at our own peril. So tonight we're going to do what we do best. Take a long, hard, and slightly depressing look at a problem everyone else seems to be ignoring. We're going to put on our industrial-grade safety goggles and wade into the economic sludge. Let's look at the 5 major plants that have shut their doors and what it means for the future of U.S. industry. Because this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about real people, real towns, and a fundamental question about what kind of country we want to be. Let's start with something that is, in the truest sense of the word, iconic. The Oreo cookie, specifically the Mondelez plant in Chicago. For over a century, that factory churned out America's favorite cookie, its sweet smell wafting over the South Side. It wasn't just a factory, it was a landmark, a piece of Chicago's soul. But recently, Mondelez decided to pack up a significant portion of its operations and move them to Mexico. Why? The company claimed the Chicago plant was outdated, but the move saved them an estimated $46 million a year, primarily in labor costs. It's the classic corporate playbook. Squeeze every last drop of profit, even if it means hollowing out the community that helped build your brand. This isn't just about a few hundred lost jobs, though that is, of course, devastating for the families affected. This is about the slow, deliberate erosion of American manufacturing in favor of international outsourcing. It's a story we've seen play out time and time again. A company, fat with profits, decides it can get even fatter by paying workers elsewhere a fraction of the wages. They dress it up in corporate jargon like optimizing our global supply chain, which is a fancy way of saying we've found people we can pay less, so see ya. The loss for Chicago is more than just economic. It's cultural. The Oreo was born there. Taking it away is like moving the Eiffel Tower to New Jersey for tax purposes. It just feels wrong. And here's the kicker: we, the consumers, are complicit. We demand low prices, and corporations are more than happy to deliver them by any means necessary. The result is a race to the bottom that benefits shareholders in the short term, but dismantles the very industrial base that created middle-class stability in the first place. The closing of the Chicago Oreo line is a perfect cream-filled metaphor for this entire process. It's sweet on the outside, but the center is a story of corporate greed and the slow, methodical crumbling of an American institution. It leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, and no amount of milk can wash it away. Next, let's travel to sunny California, specifically to Vernon, a city that sounds like a pleasant suburb, but is actually an industrial powerhouse just south of Los Angeles. For decades, the Smithfield Foods slaughterhouse was a major employer there, processing a significant portion of the state's pork. But that all came to a screeching halt when Smithfield announced it was closing the plant for good. The company cited the high cost of doing business in California. Taxes, regulations, utility bills, the price of living in a place that isn't on fire all the time. The closure didn't just put hundreds of people out of work, it sent a shockwave through the entire West Coast meat supply chain. Think about it. A facility of this size doesn't just disappear without consequences. Farmers who supplied the plant now have to find new buyers, likely further away, which means higher transportation costs. Truck drivers who hauled livestock in and processed meat out have lost a major reliable contract. The ripple effect is enormous. It's like removing a major organ from a living body. The rest of the system has to work overtime to compensate, and it's not always successful. California, a state that already imports a vast majority of its pork, now has to import even more, making it more vulnerable to supply chain disruptions and price hikes. So congratulations, California, your bacon is about to get even more expensive. This closure is a stark illustration of a broader trend in the food processing industry. Consolidation has led to fewer, larger plants, which is efficient when things are running smoothly but incredibly fragile when they're not. A single closure, whether due to a pandemic, a fire, or, in this case, a business decision, can disrupt food supplies for millions. Smithfield, by the way, is owned by a Chinese conglomerate, which adds a whole other layer of geopolitical fun to the mix. It's a reminder that the path our food takes from farm to table is longer, more complicated, and far more precarious than most of us would like to admit. The Vernon closure isn't just a local story, it's a national food security warning. Our next stop takes us to the heart of poultry country, Van Buren, Arkansas, home to a massive Tyson Foods chicken processing plant. Now, if Arkansas had a state bird, it would probably be a Tyson chicken. The company is an absolute titan in the state, a cornerstone of the economy. So when Tyson announced it was closing its Van Buren plant, along with another in Virginia, it was a body blow to the community. The company's reasoning was a cocktail of modern corporate excuses, shifting consumer demand, the need for greater efficiency, and the relentless march of automation. Essentially, they found a way to do more with fewer people. And the people of Van Buren were the ones who became redundant. The closure highlights a cruel paradox of modern capitalism. We are constantly told that innovation and automation will lead to a brighter future, and for some, it does. For the engineers designing the robots and the executives counting the savings, the future is very bright indeed. But for the person whose job was to debone chicken thighs for 8 hours a day, that brighter future looks a lot like an unemployment line. The community of Van Buren is now grappling with the loss of hundreds of jobs in a town where Tyson was one of the only games in town. What are those people supposed to do? Retrain as robot mechanics? That's the kind of glib, out-of-touch advice you get from a tech billionaire who thinks disruption is always a good thing. This isn't to say we should stand in the way of progress, but progress that leaves entire communities behind isn't progress at all. It's just a transfer of wealth. The gains from automation and efficiency are not being shared. They're being funneled to the top, while the costs are borne by the workers in the towns they live in. The story of the Van Buren plant is the story of the 21st century economy in a nutshell. A relentless pursuit of efficiency that often forgets to ask, efficient for whom? For Tyson shareholders, it's a win. For the newly unemployed of Van Buren, it's a disaster. And the chickens? Well, they're probably not thrilled either way. Let's move on to another American icon, a brand so powerful it's practically a synonym for capitalism itself: Coca-Cola. For years, Coke operated a sprawling network of local bottling facilities across the country. These plants were local institutions, providing good jobs and sponsoring Little League teams. But that model is fading fast. As a prime example, Coca-Cola recently announced the closure of a major bottling facility in California, part of a larger nationwide consolidation strategy. The idea is to centralize production in massive, hyper-efficient mega plants and truck the product everywhere else. It looks great on a balance sheet. For the towns that lose their bottler, it's another story. This trend toward centralization is a direct consequence of the freight recession. When transportation is cheap and reliable, it makes sense to ship products hundreds, even thousands of miles from a central hub. But when freight costs spike and capacity tightens, that model starts to look incredibly risky. Yet corporations like Coca-Cola are doubling down. They are betting that the efficiencies of scale will outweigh the risks of a fragile, overstretched supply chain. It's a high-stakes gamble, and the chips they're playing with are the livelihoods of their former employees and the economic health of dozens of communities. The negative effects are predictable. First, the obvious job losses. These aren't just any jobs. They were often stable, unionized positions that could support a family. Second, the local economy takes a hit. The plant paid local taxes, bought supplies from local vendors, and its employees spent their paychecks at local businesses. When the plant closes, it creates a vacuum that sucks the life out of the surrounding area. It's a slow-motion hollowing out, all in the name of cost-cutting. The irony is that, in their quest to make their supply chains more efficient, companies like Coke are making the national economy more brittle and less resilient. They're saving a few pennies on the bottle, but the real cost is being paid by all of us. Finally, we come to a company you might not have heard of, but whose products are almost certainly in your pantry, Treehouse Foods. They are one of the largest manufacturers of private label foods in the country, the store brands of cookies, crackers, and snacks that you buy to save a few bucks. Their business model is built on volume and efficiency, and as part of that relentless drive for efficiency, they recently announced the closure of their snack food plant in Lakeland, Florida, putting hundreds of people out of a job. The reason? The official line was, you guessed it, consolidation. They were closing this plant to streamline operations at their other, larger facilities. Treehouse's strategy is a textbook example of corporate consolidation. Over the years, they've bought up dozens of smaller food companies, and now they're trimming the fat by closing what they deem to be underperforming or redundant plants. It's a brutal, unsentimental process. For the executives and investors, it's about creating a leaner, more profitable company. For the workers in Lakeland, it's about their world being turned upside down. They are now faced with the daunting prospect of finding a new job in a market that is increasingly hostile to manufacturing workers. The uncertainty is terrifying. Where do you go when the biggest employer in your sector simply vanishes? This case is particularly telling because it involves private label goods. The entire premise of store brands is to offer a cheaper alternative to the big names. To do that, companies like Treehouse have to be absolutely ruthless about costs. This means that when a freight recession hits and transportation costs go up, the pressure to cut costs elsewhere, namely in labor and facilities, becomes immense. The closure of the Lakeland plant is a direct result of these interlocking pressures. It shows how economic tremors at the national level are felt most acutely by the workers on the factory floor. They are the shock absorbers for the entire system, and right now they are being worn down to nothing. So there you have it. A veteran trucking company, 5 factories, 6 communities shaken, 6 canaries in the coal mine. From Oreos in Chicago to snacks in Florida, we're seeing a pattern. This isn't just a series of unfortunate, isolated events. These closures are symptoms of a much deeper illness in the American economy. They represent a deliberate shift away from local production and stable employment toward a centralized, brittle, and fundamentally fragile system that prioritizes short-term profits over long-term stability. These closures aren't just about lost jobs. They're about the unraveling of America's industrial backbone, one community at a time. It's the slow, painful process of a country forgetting how to make things. And as this unraveling continues, the pressure on the systems that remain, particularly the trucking and logistics that our recruiting business knows so very well, becomes almost unbearable. Every closed factory means longer routes, more complex supply chains, and greater vulnerability. The entire structure becomes a house of cards, waiting for the next economic gust of wind to blow it all down. This raises a critical and deeply uncomfortable question. How many more communities can withstand these hits before the system breaks down? How many towns have to be hollowed out before we realize that efficiency has a cost, and we are all paying it? This isn't a problem with an easy solution, but the first step is to acknowledge that it's happening. We can't afford to be distracted by the next shiny object while the foundations of our economy crumble beneath our feet. So what do you think? Have you seen this happening in your community? Are you a driver who has seen these changes firsthand? Let us know in the comments below. We need to have this conversation because ignoring it won't make it go away. It will only make the eventual collapse that much more painful. Thanks for watching. As always, drivers, stay informed, stay aware, stay connected, and as always, stay safe.